Hello, everyone, and welcome to the State of California Excess Sites Program Improvements Mapping Tool and Proposal Submission webinar. Let's get underway, shall we? Let's talk about the format for today. This webinar is being recorded. It is in a webinar format, so all participant cameras are off and audio is muted. Please do feel free to ask questions at any time using the Q&A function of Zoom. Special shout out to those folks who submitted a question with their registration. Those questions, along with the unanswered questions provided in the Q&A function today, will be consolidated, answered, and posted at a later time on the GGS website under the frequently asked questions for the Excess Sites program. Also, these presentation slides in this recording will be posted on the GGS website. Okay, here's our panel of speakers. We have Tim Parham from the Department of Housing and Community Development. He's the Unit Chief of Data and Innovation. Kerry Zadell is with the Department of General Services. He's the Assistant Branch Chief of the Asset Management Branch. Christina Sutton with HCD is our Innovative Project Section Chief. Macy Long, again with HCD, is our Senior Housing Policy Development Specialist. And I'm your moderator, Gabriel Spire with Lassar Development Consultants, Interim Housing Team Lead. Let's talk about the agenda. So we reviewed the meeting format and speakers. We'll go through a couple disclaimers, talk about the background of the program, go through the proposal submission process, submission guidelines, program objectives, the scoring, submission requirements, and evaluation. We'll take a look at 16 sites, and we'll close with some resources. Now, I'm not going to read all of this to you. I'm sure you can read at your own leisure, but I will keep it up on the screen for a moment. Please do take the time to understand this information. It is important, and we're going to go through a couple slides of disclaimers. That's one. Also, FYI about all this. And one more. Okay, great. Now I'll pass it over to Christina to get us underway.
Yeah, let's start with some context around the Excess Sites program. So in 2019, Governor Newsom issued Executive Order N619, making the first time California created a formal program dedicated to offering excess state land for housing. The purpose of this program is to support affordable housing development by making state-owned land available through long-term, low-cost ground leases. Since the program's launch, we've awarded 32 projects across the state. These represent about 4,300 units in various stages of development, and we're proud to share that 220 units have already been built. So today's session is about building on that progress. I'll walk you through the updated inventory of available excess sites and introduce exciting change and how we're inviting development proposals, one that emphasizes transparency and standardization. Next slide, please. Who owns state land? The state of California, but individual agencies have jurisdiction and the relevant agency is authorized to use the property for its purposes. However, when an agency determines it no longer has use for a site, that land is declared excess and is passed through a screening process managed by DGS and HCD. The state has different authorities for disposing of excess land depending on the purpose and type of disposition. So we, HCD and DGS, evaluate these parcels for their suitability for housing and then publish them on an interactive map accessible to the public. So through this process, we issue competitive solicitations and award sites for affordable housing with priority in state funding programs given to these projects. The executive order also includes a key requirement under Government Code Section 14671.2, where at least 20% of all units must serve low-income households, with no less than 10% for very low-income households. So it's our responsibility as a state to make these opportunities support inclusive and deeply affordable housing across communities around the state. Next slide, please. Carrie?
State sovereignty. State sovereignty means basically that on state-owned land, local land use ordinances for zoning or other discretionary ordinances do not apply. CEQA does apply. DGS is the lead agency, and I'll come back to some other points on CEQA in just a minute. There's a streamlined ministerial approval process via Senate Bill 423, and other CEQA exemptions may apply to the excess sites program. Building plans are submitted and reviewed by local jurisdictions, local building departments, unless they do not have the capacity, and then plans may be submitted to DGS for review. Fire and life safety plans are reviewed and approved by the local fire authority having jurisdiction as well. DGS does issue the final approval letter after construction on any state-owned land. Getting back to the CEQA process, the developer is responsible for determining the level of CEQA review required at the developer's cost. DGS serves as the CEQA lead agency. All environmental documents shall be submitted to DGS's Environmental Services section for review and recommendations for DGS approval. It is important that the developer's environmental staff or environmental consultants make a physical inspection of the site. The developer and the developer's environmental consultant should make the determination of the level of review required based on state environmental laws and submit the justification to the Department of General Services Environmental Services section. If Senate Bill 423 or Assembly Bill 1449 are considered, the developer shall submit an administrative memo to support a notice of exemption. Keep in mind also that if there's any federal funding, a NEPA, National Environmental Protection Act, is required, and DGS is not the lead agency for any National Environmental Protection Agency review and compliance. The developer would have to refer to the appropriate responsible entity on guidance on NEPA. Upon DGS's Environmental Services Section's recommendation for approval of the environmental determination that you submit to us, DGS will sign the final documents and return to the developer to post on the Governor's Office of Planning and Research website, CEQA.net, and State Clearinghouse. The developer and the environmental consultant are supposed to post the CEQA document on CEQA.net. The Department of General Services, talking about building plans again, let me go back to that. The Department of General Services, on behalf of the state, we allow cities to accept and review building plans for affordable housing projects when they have capacity. The city may charge its published fees for the building plan review in addition to inspecting the building during construction. The city or county fire marshal may also charge published fees, including fees for inspections, utility services, and infrastructure costs that are also paid by the developer. In addition to following state building codes, in effect when the plans are submitted to the city, local amendments filed with the State Building Standards Commission must also be included in the plans. When the city and the city fire marshal have approved the plans, then they're sent to the DGS principal architect, Tom Wells, for his final review and approval. Upon completion of the construction project, verification of construction conformance to the approved plans, specification, and construction changes are submitted to Tom Wells, which is required for the state to approve the occupancy of the premises. And then we, DGS, actually provide the final approval letter and the certificate of occupancy. Next slide.
We just mentioned briefly for those of you Thank you, Carrie, for that explanation. I do want to mention that Christina with HCD has put into the chat the CEQA process for excess sites PDF document, which will provide a written explanation of everything Carrie just walked us through. Thank you, Carrie. Okay, now let's talk about the proposal submission process. And for that, we have a video, and Macy's going to walk us through it.
Thank you very much, Gabe. Good morning. Hi, everyone. I'll be demonstrating how to navigate the interactive site map posted on DGS website, which you're looking at currently. Developers can use this tool to evaluate potential excess site parcels that may be of interest with the link shown on the Affordable Housing Opportunity Map Viewer. And if there's additional interest to submit, the Developer Interest Submission Portal link is there too. Below the map, you will find several important documents for references, such as the dictionary, CEQA process, the executive order. For the purpose of the demonstration today, we will enter into Access Site Portal. Once you click on the agree to the above term and condition, it will take you to the main interactive map page. You'll see the panels on the left, right, and below. For the purpose of this, we're closing the ones below. And you'll see the main map that has several dots. It shows state excess site accepting proposals, not available, not yet offered, submit by deadline, awarded site, as well as the county boundaries. So you can check the status of each of the sites here. And on the left, there are unique site IDs and also status and different layers that you can turn on and off. For instance, the HUD qualified census tract. Once you say yes and you turn it on, it will filter out the ones that have identified as yes. And also if you do difficult development areas, you can turn the toggle on and off to filter out sites that you're interested based on those selection criteria. Same thing with high opportunity areas. If it's a TCAT HCD 2025 opportunity areas, you can choose whether you want to select sites that qualify under those categories. And if you scroll down, there are several different filters on the maps that you can choose to toggle on and off to filter out the sites that you're interested. And on top, you'll see the different layer and print buttons that you can also work with. For the purpose of today's demonstration, we'll zoom in on one particular site in Sacramento in Northern California. When you zoom in on a site and you click on it and the camera button, it will show the site ID, which is important to remember if you're interested in the site, as well as the status, whether it's accepting proposal, the jurisdiction that has oversight, the site acreage, and also other site characteristic and layers associated with the site ID and this location. For any due diligence items that are established, that are existing, you can click into the view and you can download these to assess information and to support your feasibility evaluation of these development sites as you formulate your proposals. The other way to get to the site documents is through the main interactive map on the panel below. You can also click on the site document link view here. It will take you to the same document portal where you can also download the documents. All of the sites may have existing documents that you can access to download. On the top right corner, there are two buttons, the map instruction. If you click into it, it'll be a map user guide, and you scroll down, you'll find the instruction to review the map and also specific functions of the buttons and the layers and specific descriptions associated with the filtering panels. And this is an example of what you can see. Then going back to the main page, if you go to DGS Affordable Housing button, it'll take you back to the main page, or you can click on the Developer Interest Portal if you're interested in submitting for a excess site proposal. So both ways will lead you back to an interest portal. If you don't already have an account, you'll want to create an account. And for the purpose of this, I'm typing in my own account. And you'll want to make sure that you look at the required submission material listed on HCD's website. And once you do, and once you download them, then you can click acknowledge. Thereafter, you'll select the site ID that you're interested in that has been previously identified when you're reviewing the site, and fill out the respondent details, acknowledge that you have received the site information and it's accurate and intending to submit a proposal. And if there's any co-respondent, you can also add that as well and click save and continue. Then it will take you to a document upload link where you can upload all of the documents. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Macy. Now we'll go to Tim to walk us through the mission guidelines.
Yeah, thank you, Gabe. Thanks, everybody. Tim Parham with HCD. I'll walk through a number of slides here. Before I do, just want to, I know we started like a minute early, seeing the attendee list grow quite a bit since then. So I just want to remind everybody, we are going to use probably most of the time for presentations today. That said, please do keep your questions coming in the Q&A box through Zoom. If we're not able to get to it today, we will get to it through the frequently asked questions link on the DGS website, which I believe has been dropped in the chat. If not, we'll give you all a link to that, but that's how we'll answer your questions if we don't. Okay. I'm gonna go off camera while I read my script. Okay, so the mission guidelines. This section of the presentation covers the documents you'll need to be familiar with in order to submit a proposal. It also includes some key elements of eligibility and proposal types from the submission guidelines. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, go back one. Thank you. Relevant submission documents include the following items found on the HCD Public Land for Affordable Housing Development website: the submission guidelines and affordable housing proposals, provides the rules and guidelines for submissions, the Access Sites Framework, Objectives, Scoring, Submission Requirements, and Reviewer Guidance Table is intended to inform potential respondents of the requirements for proposals, the alignment of those requirements to the Access Sites program's overall objectives, and the state's approach to scoring. Respondents are advised to carefully review each item prior to submission. Respondents are further advised to periodically check the Access Sites webpage where the table is located for updates, as the state may revise this table from time to time. Respondents are hereby made aware that the level of detail, specificity, clarity, and use of successful analogous examples in submitted narratives will be a factor in scoring. Please also note that all references to pages refer to standard copier page size in F/11. Next, the Excel submission tool, or EST for short, will be addressed on the next slide. There are two commitment statements that need to be signed by the lead respondent: the Racial Equity and Inclusive Practices commitment statement and the Speed of Delivery commitment statement. Now I'm ready for the next slide. Okay, eligible respondents. Developers, either nonprofit or for-profit, with experience in developing affordable housing in California, are encouraged to submit proposals for site. Emerging developers, which will be defined later in the presentation, are encouraged and receive a priority in our proposal scoring process. Joint ventures are allowed, but the state will only do business with a single entity known as the lead respondent or respondent. A respondent's team will eventually include other team members, but these other team members, such as those listed here, can be included at the respondent's option. But please note that any changes to respondent team members after an award is made, and we'll get into when an award is made later, must be approved by the state. Next slide, please. Okay, now I'm going to pull next few slides, go through a couple key elements from the submission guidelines. This is all in there, but I'm just bringing a little bit more context to some of these things. So another key element of the submission guidelines are that non-standard proposals, such as multi-phase proposals and assemblages, are accepted, but must follow procedures outlined in the proposals. So you can see here, A little bit more about that. You can go to the next slide. Okay, continuing on the non-standard proposals, multi-phase proposals, where there are multiple residential buildings planned to be financed and/or constructed as different phases are allowed. However, the state will only score the first phase of the proposed development, and a separate narrative is required to be submitted. Please note that therefore the first phase of the project alone must comply with the affordability provisions of Government Code Section 14671.2. Next, assemblages. Assemblages of land beyond just the state-owned land are allowed. However, we will only score the portion of the development on the state land. A separate narrative is also required for these types of proposals. Next slide. Proposals with multiple scenarios are not allowed. In prior solicitations, the state has received responses that show 2 or more development scenarios. In some cases, these scenarios are variations on a theme, whereas in others, they represent entirely different development concepts. In order to streamline evaluations and for equity and scoring, the state will not accept submissions with more than one development scenario. That doesn't mean phases. We're just talking about different concepts or schemes. You can't provide more than one development scenario per se. Respondents are advised to submit one development scenario and supporting documentation that they commit to developing in the event that they are awarded the site. Next slide. The middle deadlines. All sites listed as accepting proposals on the excess sites map are now open for submission. There are no deadlines for submissions unless otherwise noted on the map, and any deadlines that are listed are site specific. That said, the state will not begin to review submissions until June 9th, 2025. We may either issue a 45-day notice, begin selecting the highest scoring applicants for the sites with at least one qualified submission, or sites may not have enough interest and may not move forward for award until a later date. We feel that starting on June 9th, 2025, in our scoring of submissions, may still allow some of the first awarded sites, if the conditions are right, to compete for HCD funding as early as 2026, pending availability, of course, of those funds. The date also allows ample time for developers to coordinate proposals based on this new framework that was released in February. Next slide, please. Okay, the Excel submission tool, also known as the EST, is an Excel workbook that captures key information about the respondent team and the project, such as unit mix, affordability, proposed sources and uses, budgets, as well as operating budget and cash flow projections. The EST model provides value to the state in streamlining the review of proposals in a consistent format. Please email HCD and or DGS if you identify any errors or need help with the EST. Please note we are uploading a new EST model. Sorry, lost my notes for just a second. Excuse me. We are uploading a new EST model to the website very soon that will include the 2024 tax credit or TCAC rents as they initially posted. The initially posted form was tying to the 2023 TCAC rents. When the 2025 income limits and rents are available, we will be updating the EST model again. Please make sure to look for a new version dropping in the next week or so before you start to fill this out. You can see the version date on the top of every tab in the blue box on row 1. You will need to check back to the HCD website prior to submission to confirm you have the latest form to submit with. Income limits and rents are usually released in late May or June, so you can expect another update after the version we're going to post today or early next week to be dropped or released in late May or early June. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's get into the program objectives, scoring, submission requirements, and evaluation considerations. If possible, I'd suggest you follow along on the Access Sites Framework, Objective Scoring, Submission Requirements, and Reviewer Guidance table, which is found on the Public Lands page of HCD's website. And hopefully somebody's dropped that in the chat as well. The following slides are organized sort of to follow that table. The table does a number of things, which I'll talk about as we go through, but it is sort of the framework for the next several slides. If you want to print that or have it on a separate screen, that would be advised. And Gabe, if you want to go to the next slide. To help solve the affordable housing crisis in alignment with other priorities, the state is seeking proposals from respondents who can demonstrate the capacity, creativity, and commitment needed to support the following program objectives: affordability, speed of delivery, financial feasibility, racial equity and inclusive practices, and sustainability and accessibility. And we'll talk about each one of those as we go through. Next slide. Excuse me. Okay, as you can see on this table showing the maximum possible points associated with each program objective, affordability is the highest point category, followed by financial feasibility and speed of delivery. Next slide. Now, the first program objective and the highest priority program objective is affordability of the housing proposed, specifically to maximize depth and breadth of affordability while maintaining financial feasibility. Maximizing the number of lower income, that's 80% area median income and below, units should be considered as the primary goal, while remaining in conformance with California Government Code Section 14671.2. As far as submission items for this category, there are two tabs within the Excel submission tool that will be used to meet this objective. The unit mix, which relies, as I just mentioned, currently on 2023 TCAC rents and will be updated very soon with the 2024 TCAC rents, and then in the future with 2025 rents. That's the unit mix tab. And then there's another tab that Macy's going to walk through on the next few slides for our affordability score calculation sheet. And if you go to the next slide, I'll turn it over to Macy to do that.
Thank you, Tim. I'll walk through the affordability scoring overview section because it is an important evaluation for each project submission. There are several factors contributing to the overall affordability scores. One is the unit size. Larger units tend to score more favorably. Affordability level. Projects with deeper affordability will receive higher scores. 2 bedrooms and 3 bedroom units. These units, up to 25% of each total, are important in the scoring. And overall project score will consider both bedroom size and affordability that will impact the score, with larger units and greater affordability receive higher multipliers. Specifically, seniors and special needs housing, such as permanent supported housing, are scored more favorably with a higher multiplier than standard affordable housing units. The maximum score, as Tim mentioned earlier, is up to 300 points. Next slide, please. The first step to evaluate your project's affordability scoring is to enter your number of units by area median income, or in other words, AMI, and bedroom sizes in the unit mix tab. You see where it says enter the number of units in the yellow box, and you can allocate specific units by AMI level there. This will automatically calculate to the bottom of the unit matrix the total number of units by bedroom sizes. Then this total will automatically populate in the next tab, which is the affordability score calculation tab, where the unit mix from the unit mix tab will show up. The unit types will be categorized into studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedrooms. And any units larger than 3 bedrooms will be grouped under the 3+ 3-bed plus category. So anything beyond 3 bedrooms will be categorized in one category. The scoring for this affordability score calculation tab will also evaluate the affordability of each unit. Next slide. Here, you'll see that there's a particular focus to unit size and also unit types that are 80% AMI and below. In this particular tab, you'll want to enter the number of 2 and 3 bedroom units by AMI level. And again, up to only maximum 25% of each 2 bedrooms and total of 3 bedrooms will be scored, with larger units receive higher scores. Next slide. After you enter in the unit mix as well as the number of 2 and 3 bedrooms, it will go to the affordability scoring calculation, automatically translating into your total project score. Because the number of 2 and 3 bedrooms and affordability levels play a significant role in the scoring, the AMI multiplier as well as the housing types multiplier for seniors or special needs housing are scored at a higher multiplier level, yielding your overall project score. And this score represents the project's overall affordability level scoring and the overall project competitiveness. And thus, it is important to provide units, types, affordability level, and unit sizes, and also evaluate the maximum score to ensure competitiveness. With that, I'll turn it over to Tim. Thank you.
Thank you, Macy, for that pivot to the Excel submission tool. You can play with that yourself and have that framework. And this webinar will be recorded and we'll post it to HCD's website, so you can go back and review what Macy just talked through there as you get into filling out your proposal in the tool. But I'm going to jump ahead, and if you want to go back to that framework table available on the HCD website, I'm going to talk about the next program objective, which is speed of delivery. Speed of delivery of the housing is another important program objective. Proposals must provide demonstration of a feasible path to meeting the timing goals of the executive order, including a clear CEQA and entitlement strategy under the framework of state sovereignty that supports the timely advancement of funding applications. Commitment to exceed all deadlines within developer control, prioritizing this project within your broader portfolio of developer projects, and proactively seek technical assistance pre and post application for any federal, state, or local funding program. We want to see that you have the capacity, resources, and expertise to move the project forward quickly. Next slide, please. Okay, might be on the slide for a little bit. So these are all the submission items under speed of delivery. There's 8 of them. The first 3 items are sheets to complete an Excel submission tool. We'll preview the schedule and develop a pre-development budget on the coming slides. The respondent team, so now I'm at, I'm going to talk about item number 2, the respondent team. The respondent team must include the lead respondent. Again, as I mentioned earlier, regards to your total respondent team, all other team members are expected to be a part of the respondent team. Should be identified if possible, but it's also not required to submit. Now I'm jumping down to item number 4 on the slide, development schedule narrative. The development schedule narrative is 3 pages or less, where respondents describe potential risks of meeting the proposed schedule and/or assumptions included to meet the proposed schedule. Up to 50 points may be awarded based on the schedule itself, as submitted in the EST tab that we'll preview soon. Actually, on the next slide, I'll preview that. And its efficiency and reasonableness. Up to 80 points may be awarded based on an awareness and identification of the risk categories, and that feasible mitigation measures are in mind. Next, I'm going to talk through the pre-development financing narrative and demonstration of pre-development financing capacity, which is item number 5 on the list on the slide. The highest scoring proposals will identify the ability and capacity to secure anticipated pre-development funds necessary to meet the schedule and provide evidence of fund availability from fund source. Please note that financial statements for internal working capital do not count for the 3-page limit. Next, item number 6, the speed of delivery commitment statement. This must be signed by the respondent and it speaks for itself. Thanks for the link there, Christina, in the chat. And then pipeline, the respondent development capacity, that is leave a narrative that you'll need to fill out. Instructions, again, are in the framework table. Pipeline and capacity narrative, though, is 3 pages or less, confirming that you have adequate capacity and procedures or plans in place in case of changes in staffing to maintain appropriate staffing levels on the project. And I think that covers it for the speed of delivery items. I'm going to go in more depth on a couple of them in the coming slides. If you go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is a screenshot of a portion of the project overview sheet in the EST, showing just the development schedule that you will populate with dates in your submission. I want to give some context to help with everybody's proposals. First of all, don't mean to imply by putting this on the first row that you need to establish a limited partnership in order to apply. You do not need to establish a limited partnership to apply. However, we do encourage you to set up any limited partnerships early in the process, as it will streamline our reviews and site control documentation and ultimately the execution of the ground lease. But it's not required to submit your application. Okay, next, I want to give a heads up that later in the presentation, we will outline the evaluation process, but the site is not awarded until the lease option agreement, or as we will call it, the LOA, is executed. So in filling out your schedule, you should assume at least 60 days after the final submission deadline for the LOA to be executed and site awarded. And I'll talk more about that later in the evaluation process. As noted earlier by Carrie, building plans typically go through the local building department review prior to going to DGS for approval. You can assume that plans will route to the local government in your proposal. Disregard the fact that this says submission of building plans to DGS. It may be directly to DGS or it may be directly to the local government. Just want to clarify that. And then as far as ground lease execution and construction closing, those are typically very close in timing, as HCD is required to confirm proof of financing in order to authorize the execution of the ground lease. And in any case, for this your overall development timeline, the ground lease execution and closing should be within 3 to 5 years of award date. Okay, if you go to the next slide. And this was one of the other items in speed of delivery that's required. It's another tab in the Excel submission tool. I just want to touch on a little bit of the details here for the pre-development budget. So this is a snippet of the pre-development budget that will be required for all proposals to complete. The intent is to show an understanding of the financing necessary to advance the project according to the proposed development schedule until construction start. Also, this budget is intended to show an understanding of the cost environment for development within the site-specific location. And finally, that the respondent is considering reasonable funding sources. and amounts relative to the project characteristics and applicable funding eligibility requirements. Another tip, please note that the top row, where it says pre-development milestones, contains a drop-down for relevant milestones that should correspond to the dates in the development schedule that we just talked about, found in the project overview tab of the EST and previewed on the last slide. Note that the pre-development milestones in the pre-development budget tab are more detailed than what is required for the development schedule that we just previewed on the last slide and is part of the project overview. So saying it again, ideally, the timeline should match up between your project overview tab, development schedule, and your pre-development budget tab. And as I mentioned in one of the submission items, you should be sharing in your pre-development financing narrative and demonstration of pre-development financing capacity, the ability to back up that pre-development budget with a potential funding source, or tell us how you'll get a funding source to meet those needs and move the project forward quickly. Okay. You want to go to the next slide? Okay. Making it through the program objectives here, financial feasibility is another critical program objective. A project that scores well in affordability must back it up with a solid financing strategy. Specifically, this includes demonstration that the proposed project is not only financially feasible, but is also financially probable. Developer indicates the project has ability to be competitive in proposed and applicable funding programs, including no negative points or mitigation plan to resolve negative. The developer has a willingness to apply for additional funding if needed. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to touch on the 7 submission items under financial feasibility. And first is judgments and violations disclosure. For this, respondents shall disclose in a declaration all of the following as applicable, if any of them occurred within 5 years of the submission date: defaults, any judgments, court orders, pending litigation, contractual disputes, violation notices, or other matters reflecting a violation of applicable regulations related to the operations or projects undertaken by the developer entity or any of its individual members or affiliates exercising direct or indirect control over the development entity, including all key persons on the respondent team. Submission item number 2, negative points disclosure. For the negative points disclosure, the respondent must provide a declaration of the existence of any negative points assigned from the California Debt Limit Allocation Committee, CDLAC, the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee, TCAC, and or the State of California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, within the previous 6 months prior to the submission date. For items 3 through 5 from the list here, those are all Excel submission tool tabs or sheets found in that Excel submission tool available on HCD's website. Please note the sources, uses, operating budget, and cash flow should be in a fairly familiar format to use that for those that have applied to the multifamily Supernova at HCD. Item number 6 under financial feasibility is the funding strategy and contingency planning narrative, which should outline in 3 pages or less the Plan A and Plan B financing strategy. Please note that there is no preference in the Excess Sites program to proposing to use local funding. We're sort of agnostic to that. And please also note, this is not to confuse you. We're not asking for you to submit 2 full development scenarios. We're asking you to tell us what is your backup strategy to finance the your development proposal. Okay, and then item number 7 is a conceptual site plan. Conceptual site plan is required to provide base level information such as the proposed building program for the ground floor, at least 1 residential floor, the building height, the unit mix. So your conceptual site plan should be able to allow the reviewer to see what you submitted in your EST unit mix visually. Parking, if any. Respondents are encouraged but not required to include any major design assumptions. For example, use of an existing vehicle access point on a site could be noted on the site plan, or assumed location of off-site facilities that your site plan is predicated on. Renderings and other drawings are not necessary and will not be scored, but are encouraged where helpful to convey designs to us as reviewers. Go to the next one, please, Gabe. Racial equity and inclusive practices are an important program objective. Respondent must provide a clear commitment, vision, and strategy to advance racial equity and inclusive practices aligned with the California statewide housing plan. This should lead to measurable, achievable, and quantifiable outcomes and progress in all aspects of housing development and operations to bring about significant positive change and reduce disparities in access to opportunities. As far as what you need to submit, there's 3 items here, and I'll touch on them briefly. Please submit the commitment statement with the respondent's signature on it. This document is available on the HCD website for download. Next, the racial equity and inclusive practices narrative is intended to allow the respondent to talk about prior success in creating stable communities that provide equitable opportunities for affordable, safe, and secure housing. Also in this 2 pages or less, the respondent's prior success in identifying and addressing, within the context of housing development, systematic/structural racism issues and racial disparities, both past and current, including listing specific outcomes, should be included. And then finally, the Racial Equity and Inclusive Practices Action Plan is 3 pages or less, focused on specific data to be used to track outcomes of the proposed housing project. Okay, next slide. Sustainability and accessibility round out the program objectives. In these areas, the Access Sites program desires to see a commitment, where practical and feasible, to pursue sustainability and accessibility practices beyond the requirement of the California Building Code as part of the development, particularly those that will advantage the project in major funding programs through advancement of the state's climate and special needs populations goals. Again, I'll say that last part again. Particularly those that will advantage the project in major funding programs through advancement of the state's climate and special needs populations goals. So advantage the project in major funding programs is the keywords there. Up to 50 points each for narratives of 4 pages or less, describing proposed sustainability or accessibility features, how these features benefit the financial competitiveness of the project, and respondent has examples of prior success in delivering the features or approaches described in the narratives. So that's a little bit about those requirements. Go to the next slide, please. Okay. So in order to incentivize equity in the development of affordable housing and to spur innovation and competition for the same, the state has elected to provide additional points to emerging developers as defined, and to joint venture arrangements that advance the advancement of emerging developers. There are 2 pathways to these points. One, qualifications of lead respondent as an emerging developer per our program definitions, which I think are going to be on the next slide. 2, a lead respondent submits a memorandum of understanding with an emerging developer that includes developer fee structure, ownership, and commitments in accordance with requirements found in the Access Sites framework, objective scoring, submission requirements, and reviewer guidance table. We outline specific requirements for each of those things: developer fee, ownership, and commitments for any joint ventures that include an emerging developer. Next slide, please. Just going to read our definition of an emerging developer. In accordance with the most recently published HCD multifamily housing program guidelines, or as determined by the state in its reasonable discretion, an emerging developer refers to an entity which can also be a tribal entity with experience as the developer, owner, or operator of a minimum of one, but not more than 4 rental housing developments with unit types, project sizes, and occupancy comparable to the proposed project. Note, a state or local government agency or nonprofit controlled by a public entity cannot qualify as an emerging developer. Next slide. Okay, tiebreaker. The tiebreaker for projects will come down to 2 factors: highest number of affordable units below 50% of area median income, or very low income units, and highest number of total project units. Next slide, please. Now I want to touch on the evaluation process. The evaluation process is outlined in Exhibit 3 of the submission guidelines. I encourage you all that are considering submitting a proposal to look through that to understand what you're committing to and what the process will look like. In the event that the state receives more than one qualified submission for a given site, the state shall comparatively evaluate the proposals. Any resulting notice of selection will be issued to the highest ranked submission. Respondents with a submission in the portal will be notified of deadlines. As it noted earlier, I think Macy mentioned this, you can start and stop a draft submission as much as you like. So as long as you start a draft submission and enter your contact information in there, you'll be in the loop for if and when we set a deadline for submission. Another point is that highest scoring respondent will have 60 days to negotiate a lease option agreement or LOA with the state. So topic I'm talking about right now is how you actually get awarded an excess site. So said another way, you can be the highest scoring respondent and not be awarded an excess site if you fail to come to terms with the state on a lease option agreement within 60 days of our notification to you that you are the highest scoring respondent. In that scenario, we would move on to negotiations with the next highest scoring respondent. So if you're proposing for a site and there's multiple competitive or qualifying submissions and you're not the highest scoring, we'll do our best to let you know, but we can't officially announce anything or negotiate with another party until, and the unfortunate event if we were to cease negotiations with the highest scoring respondent. The state may determine a longer timeline for negotiations at its sole discretion and reserves the right to move to negotiations with the next highest scoring respondent if an LOA is not executed within the 60 days. Please note the LOA template is posted on DGS's website. Really encourage you to go through the LOA template prior to submitting your proposal. And again, just to make this super clear, the site is not awarded until we have an executed lease option agreement. We won't have any press releases or anything about a highest scoring respondent. We won't do that until we all sign the lease option agreement. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the next couple of slides are taken verbatim from the submission guidelines. I forget exactly the page numbers, but you can find this towards the end. I'm just going to read these expectations. The respondent selected by the state shall accept the excess site, the excess state-owned property in its present as-is condition without any express or implied warranties. 2, enter into a long-term ground lease and regulatory agreements with the state at a nominal cost. 3, be responsible for applying for financing, conduct all due diligence, and obtain necessary permits and utility connection approvals including but limited to encroachment, grading, and building construction permits from the state and any applicable additional authorities having jurisdiction. Okay, next slide. Continuing on this list, the respondent shall be selected by the state shall be responsible for all on-site and off-site costs and expenses associated with the development. 5, ensure a payment of state prevailing wages to the extent applicable. 6, assist DGS, the lead agency, with compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act, including the preparation of any necessary environmental documents and exploring the applicability of streamlining and potential exemptions. 7, be responsible for payment of applicable local fees, if any are applicable. 8, be responsible for meeting all milestones identified in any contractual documents between the state and the respondent selected by the state. A few other things to highlight for consideration in your proposal. Mainly, you should really read through the lease option agreement on DGS website and be sure you're prepared to enter into that agreement as is, pending project-specific schedule and details are added. This template has been perfected over roughly 20 current projects negotiations on the lease option agreement, and other than the project-specific details, is not expected to change. So said a different way, the template that we have on the website is exactly what we're planning to sign, and the only negotiations we're expecting to enter into during that 60-day period where we tell you you're the highest scoring applicant is to populate the exhibits with timelines based on your proposal and negotiate in any other site-specific situations. The lease option agreement template identifies a 3-year term for the developer to secure project financing after the award of the site. We are not a land banking program. We expect progress during that 3-year term. Any changes to the development proposals must be approved by the state. Please see Table A of the LOA template, which outlines the types of changes that we will allow and how we authorize those changes. So again, your proposal is sort of locking you into a starting point for LOA negotiations. After the LOA, we do allow changes, but we have a process to document that. The developer is expected to honor signed commitments. I mentioned those around racial equity, inclusive practices, as well as speed of delivery. Okay, so I think we made it through submission guidelines, evaluation process, and now we're going to go into previewing some site profiles. Okay, so I'm going to use most of the remaining time we have to highlight some information on some of the sites that are listed on the map. The order of detail that I'm sharing does not indicate any priority from the state. So again, please don't read into which sites we're going to share slides on. Again, if I don't get to any of these or don't have much to say beyond what's posted on the slide itself, that's okay. We'll post this on the HCD website. It's really just meant to tell you anything or consolidate information on what we felt like were some of the higher scoring PCAC sites. Again, the state access sites affordable housing opportunities map that was just dropped in the chat. We selected all these sites based on amenity scoring with TCAC. The data that we use is subject to change. As you know, like amenities like grocery stores and those sorts of things come and go. We encourage you to do your own analysis for the sites, but based on our analysis, a lot of these sites are the highest scoring in high resource areas typically, and we'll walk you through some of these sites. But again, it doesn't indicate our priority or our expectations of review. We're going to review sites based on number of submissions primarily. So where we have a lot of submissions, that's where we'll focus our resources. Next slide, please, Gabe. Okay, so this is a site in Gilroy and Santa Clara County. You can see the site ID there. It's actually in a low resource opportunity map designation. However, it is Scoring well on the amenities overall for TCAC and HCD. There's some due diligence reports that are either available or will be made available. We talk through how to access those, and there's also an FAQ on DGS's website to tell you exactly where those due diligence reports can be found. And you should check back to that space often. But there's a couple of site-specific notes that we wanted to touch on the Gilroy Armory, and I'm just going to read these here. Transparent communication with the county is critical. Why is that? Because the county is leasing the current building on the space for a homeless shelter. A relocation strategy for the shelter should be baked into any proposal. Proposal should demonstrate sensitivity to the shelter's function and include timeline for transition if applicable. Respondents won't be penalized for factoring a relocation period into their project schedule. So if you're interested in this site, I would encourage you to reach out to the county directly to help inform your proposal. Next slide. Okay, here's another site in LA that is owned by the Employment Development Department that we wanted to mention. You can see the site ID. And it's a bit, you can look it up on the map right now if you want to follow along. It's a low resource designation, but I believe it, again, will score well in TCAC amenity scoring. Due diligence reports listed there. And here's what I really want to get to is the site note, specifically that there is SB 572 exist, and DGS is required to solicit proposals specifically from California Land Trust for the redevelopment of the site. However, we knew that legislation existed before we posted on the map, and we want to guide you, if you're interested in this great site, into some of the community interests as we understand them. So there is a strong community interest in retaining or enhancing employment services, which is really the genesis for that bill. So development proposals that include ground floor commercial uses, particularly workforce services or employment-related nonprofits, will, based on our best estimation, will be more aligned with community expectations. Of course, we can't speak on behalf of the community here, but that is our understanding of the genesis of SB 572, and the desires for the local community on the site is to have some sort of employment-related use mixed with housing here. Next slide, please. All right, so the next site is in Santa Cruz. A really great site, a gateway to the city here. A number of points here, which I'll read. It's a high resource site. We're ordering some due diligence documents. It's highly complex coordination on this site between Caltrans and the city of Santa Cruz. The city has done a lot of planning around this, and it includes design standards, infrastructure, and assumptions of affordable housing on this site, and it's beyond just the yellow sites that you're seeing on the slide here. The city has assembled a number of sites surrounding both the sort of diagonal parcel and surrounding, and done their own master planning on this site. So do not assume this is a traditional state excess site. It'll be some sort of collaboration between the state and the city. So parcel boundary configuration is also currently under review and being analyzed to accommodate potential future highway expansion. Coordination with the city is essential, but please do not contact the city yourselves. Allow HCD and DGS to do that so we can get on the same page. I do expect that we will be changing this site to not yet offered in the coming weeks as we work through this with the city before releasing the site again. So I know that there is a couple developers who have already expressed interest. You'll be notified of the temporary hold and given the opportunity to re-engage once boundary and governance issues are resolved. So don't fear. We are tracking you, and we will give you an email once we change the color of this site on the map. Again, that's one of our options in the new program framework, is that we can keep a site on the map, but we can say it's not yet available at this time, and we'll change the color on the map when we are ready to solicit it. And we need some more time to work this through, both with Caltrans and the city of Santa Cruz. So thank you for your understanding on that one. The next slide, please. Our most recent site added to the map is in Los Baños in Merced County. And we think it's a great site. It's high resource, owned by Caltrans, actually. And DGS is ordering some due diligence. Some notes about the site: there is a current farm lease in place on these parcels, but if an affordable housing project proceeds at a future date, the leases can easily be terminated prior to construction commencement. We're not suggesting or dictating the population for consideration if you're looking at this site to submit a proposal, but we do want to give some thoughts on this. And that's that there's a bill passed in 2024, AB 2240, that bears some consideration for HCD, given the proximity to HCD's Office of Migrant Services Center, known as the Rafael Silva Migrant Center in Los Baños. So this could be a potential candidate as intended by AB 2240 for permanent farm worker housing. Just wanted to flag that potential connection to providing permanent farm worker housing there in Los Baños. Next slide, please. So this is a fairly big site in Ione in Amador County, owned by Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. It doesn't have a TCAC opportunity map designation. HCD can help provide guidance on how different funding programs interpret that designation status. That anyone interested, but we do believe it scores well. Our map scoring tool sort of determined whether it was a rural site or urban site and scores them per TCAC standards. So the site wouldn't be on the map if it didn't score well in the rural methodology. The road project, which is closed, it's close to the youth correctional facility in Ione. Developers are encouraged to contact the city of Ione prior to submission. We encourage that actually with all the sites, and we'll see that at the end, but you can move to the next slide, the next site, Gabe. Okay, this is a site in El Centro in Imperial County, also owned by Caltrans. It's low resource. Again, it still scores well by our estimation and amenities. Due diligence is on order. It could be a potential candidate for permanent farm worker housing. Again, you tell us in your proposal, but there's a thought on that. Next slide, please. Marin County, really high resource location, good amenities. It is just right next to the San Quentin prison, though. It's located near our other access site project near San Quentin, and you may need to clarify extent, or we may need to clarify extent of available area parcel boundaries on this one. Next slide. The site in Napa County, 5.3 acres. It is owned by the Toronto State Hospitals, which typically provide their own utility network. So that would be something to look into if you're interested in this one, is to confirm whether utilities are nearby or if they may be too costly to bring to the site. So I just encourage anybody looking at proposing on this one to consider utility connections. Next site is in Sacramento, and it's owned by DGS. It's moderate resource and in a high quality transit area. I think this is a great site and ready to move quickly. Next one. Another site in Sacramento, also owned by DGS. Again, high quality transit, ready to move fairly quickly. Next. Okay, another Sacramento site right on the river, owned by Department of Parks and Rec. Scores well per our estimations. Environmental and other reports are in order, and it's just along the river as noted there, and you may have to work on some logistics related to that location. Next slide. Okay, site in San Bernardino. You can see everything here owned by DGS. Nearly 2 acres. It's high quality transit and high walkability, half mile to the San Bernardino Transit Center. Next slide. The site, Montana in San Bernardino County, owned by the DMV. It was a DMV field office, but it's no longer operational. So that seems like a good site. Next one. Next site is in Chino in San Bernardino County. It's a closed correctional facility nearby. It's insufficient data. Memory serves on this one. The big site, and you may want to think about some of the proximity or possibility of adding some amenities via the development here. Next slide. The DGS owned site in Stockton, low opportunity, but good access to amenities. It's next to the park and arena. Next one. Okay, Stockton, San Quentin. This is a DMV site, moderate resource, and it's in a high quality transit area. Again, we didn't go through every site on the map. We just wanted to highlight a couple of these and consolidate some of the information. Nearly all this information is available within the excess sites state or the state affordable housing, the state excess sites affordable housing opportunities map. Christina dropped the link to the map there. There's rich attribute data in the GIS map that you can click through and get an understanding of all this stuff, but wanted to just consolidate this on a few sites. There are more sites. We're open to your questions on those sites if needed, but just highlighting a few here. So with that, I'm gonna get to stop hearing my voice. I'm gonna turn it over to Carrie.
Thank you, Tim. That was a lot of information, so thank you very much, HCD. Tips for staying informed and preparing strong proposals. Please visit the DGS website regularly. It's your go-to resource for updates, guidance, and frequently asked questions. There's links in the website, and of course the map. The map is inside the DGS website. Check the site map frequently. That will give you information on the status of each site to see if proposals are still being accepted, if they change colors, or if they've been awarded, they'll change colors, or if there's proposal deadlines or notifications that a site is no longer accepting proposals. So it's really important to keep checking back in the map and the DGS website for updates and guidance. And we really want to stress how important it is to contact the local jurisdictions to discuss your proposal. Checking about the availability of capital or operating subsidies by local jurisdictions, and also confirming access to the state-owned site. Even though there's state sovereignty on the state-owned site, oftentimes, you might have to build a driveway over city sidewalks, for example, so you'll need an encroachment permit. So you need to know what the easements are around the site and the utility connections, try to get a hold of those plans and have the very substantive discussion with the relevant authorities having jurisdiction around the site. And then lastly and finally, we just want to ask you to please be thoughtful when you're submitting your comprehensive conceptual design considerations. It's really important that you take into consideration the site access, fire and life safety plans, and again, the utility connections on the site when you do the conceptual site plan. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Gabe. There are some additional resources here. Thank you all.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carrie. As folks can see, we have some additional resources here linked for your convenience. And these are, again, the presentation is going to be available on the DGS and HCD website. You'll be able to find this and use these links at your convenience. Also, please note that there have been quite a few helpful resources put into the chat function. Thank you, Christina. We're going to be staying on. If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A. And again, we will be responding to those questions, collating them, organizing them, and responding to them on the FAQ website, FAQ page of the DGS website. I'm seeing a message though that it looks like we're ready to answer some questions live. Is that right, Christina?
I would probably finish up the next slide and then we can go to Q&A.
Right. Okay, thank you. So a reminder, here's some contact information. For questions about how to use the map, please use affordablehousing@dgs.ca.gov. For general inquiries or about affordable housing development on excess state land, please email accesssites@htd.ca.gov and affordablehousing@dgs.ca.gov. Don't forget to subscribe to HCD's housing plan and policy email list to receive these important announcements regarding the executive order and excess state land for affordable housing. Thank you very much for attending. Let's see about questions in the